Hello. Uh, Hello. Welcome to Conversations in Calvinism, as well as welcome to the Society for Evangelical Arminians. I'm getting an echo, so let me adjust myself. Okay, I think I'm set now. Sorry about that. Sorry for the fumble in the opening, but welcome, everybody. I'm Dan Chapa, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend TurretinFan, and we are here to discuss a recap of especially the debate you had on limited atonement, and perhaps we'll cover more. So I guess that's the plus more that could possibly be in there. But I suppose we'll focus first on the debate you had with Lucas Curcio on Standing for Truth on limited atonement this past week. So for starters, how you doing, TurretinFan?
Doing great. Good to be talking with you. It's nice to have at least a little bit of a break before the next debate. So for the last month or so, it's been approximately one debate per week, and a lot of that there was a lot of lead up to the debate, and the first, some of those debates were ones that had been extended. So like there was one with Chris Date that had been extended from January because of some personal family stuff for Marlon, and there was stuff that was extended from that was from December, and there was the canon debate was originally scheduled in January, and then got rescheduled until this last month. The others were originally scheduled then, but they ended up the preparation for those kind of got eclipsed by those other two debates, like the FreeGrace debate. We did that almost immediately after we had just done a team debate on the canon,
right.
And then back to debating another FreeGrace related topic within a week or so with the Sanctification debate with PraiseIAM, and then finally this most recent limited atonement debate. So I'm not saying I'm debated out, but I am glad for a little bit of respite, so I can do a little bit more reading and a little bit less debating, at least for a short time, until debates pick up again. God willing, in September, I saw Kevin's Biblical Discussions was here saying, what's up? He's on the debate agenda for September 8, I believe, over at Standing for Truth. So we should have a Calvinism-related debate on compatibilism. That should be a fun topic to discuss. So how about yourself? How have you been?
I've been good. Been doing real good. Yeah, thanks for asking. Been excited. So I think my debate docket has calmed down a little bit. I've got a James 2 debate scheduled, and I have another one in the works, possibly on penal substitution, which I'm looking forward to as well. But yeah, on the debate side, I think I've always taken it a little bit slower than you have, but that's a good thing. Yeah, I don't know. I'm more of a slow thinker, more of a crock pot of a head, but that's the way it goes.
That's such an interesting visual image. Hey, slow. I mean, if you talk to anybody who's a fan of barbecue, they'll tell you slow cooked meat is the way to go. Like, if something's been smoking there for like 8 hours, 10 hours, I don't know I'm not an expert at this, but those people who really love it, that it's just tender, it falls apart in your mouth. Oh, it's so good. So the people should enjoy, and honestly, one of the biggest advantages to the listener is if the people who are doing the debate are well prepared. And preparation comes at the cost of taking time to slowly, as you said, think through things. So it's good it's not like a specific virtue to have done 1,000 debates in 2 months or something. That maybe somebody can do it, and if someone really has the ability to do it, great. But the debates that will hopefully have some lasting significance are ones where we put in the effort to prepare ourselves and offer up something useful for the people who are listening. I hope that people benefited from the limited atonement debate. It itself was one of the delayed debates. It only delayed about a week, but the result was a little bit of extra preparation time, and hopefully it showed up for the listener. I know my big challenge going into the debate was, I think I mentioned to you this even before the debate, initially I had 40 minutes of opening statement, And then as the debate got closer, I went up from 40 to like an hour and 20 or almost 2 hours worth of material to discuss. And it's just no way to have that much material in a 20-minute opening. And if I sometimes feel like with I'm trying to think which debate it was, maybe the Sanctification debate, I felt like I maybe went too fast and tried to squeeze too much in the amount of time that was available. And I'm not sure. I mean, I've never been accused of speaking too fast since I've been doing these debates, but I feel sometimes I am going too fast, and just words are getting lost and swallowed up in the speed of how fast things are going. Even on this debate, where I purposely cut it way, way back, I still felt like maybe things got lost. And by myself, when I'm listening to the other side, sometimes I don't catch every single thing they say if they're going quickly, and if they don't have slides or something else to help guide my concentration and focus me on what they think are the critical points. So yeah, preparation is really valuable, and it's an underrated skill in today's Twitter-based themes. Somebody actually made a comment like that the other day. They're like, "Well, why do you need to have debates? You have Twitter. You can just go and comment on Twitter whenever you want to."
120 characters or however many, 140. Yeah, I guess now we're up to 280, so now we can really have at it.
Yeah. And if you invest in the blue check, you can make it like pages and pages long, but people will see the first 280 and no one reads beyond that.
That's right. Yeah. So how did you, okay, what's your overall impression of the debate, big picture, with your debate with Lucas on limited atonement?
He didn't go in any path that was like wildly far from what I would expect. So that's good. It's not like it's not like his ideas were coming completely out of left field or something like that. On the other hand, there were some of the arguments he chose to argue from were not the things I expected to be his primary focuses. And I suppose, I hope that was like a deliberate choice on his part, that he wanted to try to like take some paths less traveled or something like that. But the technique that he used of quoting a lot of Calvinist theologians to support his position is one that I've heard him borrow from some of the other people he's had on his channel that like to quote Calvinist theologians on the topic of limited atonement. I think I understand why he thinks that's a good idea, but it's not, from my standpoint, if people start to dig in and they think, oh, well, so you're endorsed, like he mentioned Dabney as an example. So like if you get into what Dabney actually says, I'm pretty sure that he's going to almost immediately part paths with Dabney on these topics, which raises the question, like, why cite Dabney in the first place? And if the answer is just, well, I'm trying to bring up a Calvinist versus Calvinist debate, I didn't, from my standpoint, that doesn't advance the kind of the truth seeking agenda of debate. But that's not the only agenda people have. So, it is what it is.
Well, so for me, that highlights the very nuanced nature of the debate. Because, when you look at the resolution, did Christ die for everybody, or did he die for the elect alone? It seems like there's just this vast difference. But when you get into, well, what exactly do you mean? Oftentimes, it's harder and harder to find the exact difference. So, Lucas was presenting a provisional atonement for everybody, and like that, and then but the application is conditional based on faith, and it just becomes hard to tell where exactly the difference is. And I think it becomes even harder when you compare like a view like your own to Dabney's or to Charles Hodge or whoever it might be. It kind of becomes pretty tough to tell, other than that headline point of Christ dying for everybody. And maybe they exegete certain passages in different ways than you. But what is the fundamental difference in you guys' theology? It becomes really, really tough to tell. Like, what is Charles Hodge actually saying that you disagree with? Or what does Dabney say that you like, oh no, I totally disagree with Dabney on that. You know, wow, he went way wrong. It's hard to find that smoking gun issue. So, I mean, that was part of the impression that I got. You start from pretty different places in terms of you're saying that Christ died for the elect alone, but what you mean by that versus what he means when he says Christ died for everybody, it's tougher. It gets tougher and tougher and tougher to figure out what exactly you guys are disagreeing on.
Yeah, that is an addition. That did add a layer of challenge. He's right from a debate theory standpoint when he said in his opening something like he doesn't have to establish his own perspective in this debate because that's not how we've phrased the debate. From a debate perspective, that's fine. And if let's say that he felt like in theory, imagine that my view is just one view, and there might be like 1,000 different views. And if he just shows that my view is only 1% chance correct, and it's 99% chance it's one of the other 1,000 views, then he presumably has persuaded people that it's not my view. But of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that his view would be correct either. And that kind of gets us back to my concern about what's the primary agenda of the debate. If the primary agenda is let's shoot down Calvinism or TurretinFan's version of Calvinism or whatever it is, then maybe that's a fine strategy. But if his idea was I want to present that Christ died for all in the sense that he means by that, then presumably he could just focus on his own view. But he doesn't have to follow that approach. And presenting, like you said, there may be some nuanced difference between what Dabney said or what was it Schreiner. He was one of the people he frequently went to. Maybe Schreiner's take on some exegetical point is slightly different from mine. We didn't even really have time to get into that. It wasn't a debate on what does Dabney mean by what Dabney says, or what does Schreiner mean about what Schreiner says. It might be fun. Those are kind of things where I think it might be fun to get into and do just for my own personal interest, to kind of look up the citations, check out the context, see what is it that Schreiner said, and then see like how far is that different from what I was saying. It might be that it's like 180 degrees different on a few points, and then like the overarching interpretation is the same conclusion. Just we kind of took, one of us went straight through town, the other one took the business express around town, but anyway we ended up on the other side of town. So I don't know if that's, I'm not saying I know that that's the case, but there are times like with Dabney, for example. I think if you look at what Dabney says, there's two things. One, I'm kind of loath to recommend Dabney after some of the stuff that I've read from him on racial topics, because they're so detestable, especially. And I understand they're like a product of his time and so forth, but I don't. Let's
take Charles Hodge. Let's take Charles Hodge as a better example.
Charles Hodge. So Charles Hodge is quite close to my view. In fact,
very close.
I'm not sure there's any significant difference between our views. So it was kind of puzzling to hear him bring up Charles Hodge. Dabney has some language that sounds more different from what I'm saying, but both of them, when it comes right down to it, are people who are affirming the Westminster Confession's statement on the atonement, which lines up exactly with my view. So there's been a disconnect somewhere along the line.
Well, let me put it this way. So there's 16 passages that say Christ died for the world or all men or something like that. But we interpret them differently in almost every case. And I don't think anyone's going to think that that's a coincidence. Like there's a reason. You have some view that leads you to interpret those passages one way, and I have some view that leads me to interpret those passages another way. Okay, so what is that underlying thing? So in your case, it seems like that God So if I heard you correctly in the debate, you want to make sure that you're not saying that God fails, and you believe that on the cross Christ purchased redemption and propitiation and some other terms. So but you say that those are for the elect, whereas Lucas would say, well, those are for believers and they're conditional on faith. So I think that's a very subtle difference. So he purchased it for the elect, he purchased it for believers. Sounds nearly the same thing, but it's not, because for believers, it's believers in what, right? Like, part of what they believe in is the cross. So that kind of, if you say it as, well, Christ through the cross guaranteed the salvation of believers, it inherently in there is this idea of, well, they're trusting in Christ's work on the cross for their salvation, which is like baked into the offer for them. Whereas if I said, Christ purchased salvation for the elect, he guarantees the salvation of the elect, it seems to have another premise in there, which is, and it makes sure that they believe and get saved. So I think maybe that's part of the difference is, both of you have a sort of the definitive atonement in one sense, but it's just in two very different senses. One guaranteeing that the person will become a believer, and the other guaranteeing that the believer will be saved.
And his version requires sort of a further qualification that the person who's a believer and continues to be a believer will be saved.
Right. Yeah, that's true too. That is true.
Which, I mean, that part of the challenge in the debate as well was trying to see like how much I was going to focus on dealing with his objections that are premised on his conditional salvation view. Well, in other words, this conditional security view, and how much I wanted to try to make my arguments more general that would apply also to people who have a once saved, always saved, or free grace, or some other non-loss of salvation view. So it was tough, because I do think that it's an important problem with his alternative is that for him, the cross doesn't even guarantee the salvation of people who have begun to believe. It's just only people who continue until their death to believe. And that's that to me, that for like, as much as I think that it's problematic to say that it doesn't guarantee the salvation of the elect. I think it's even more problematic to say it doesn't guarantee the salvation of someone who today believes.
Yeah.
So, but the problem is, how many points, like how specific do I want to craft my arguments to being a rebuttal of his specific alternative versus how much do I want to spend on the bigger picture? Because there's a lot of other views besides his.
Well, yeah, and when you're affirmative to an extent, you have to rebut his position, but mostly you just ignore his position and establish your own because you're affirmative. So real quick, actually, so I wanted to comment on some comments.
Sure.
And then we can recalibrate. So Patrick says, you won and you're winning right now. And
did you change his icon, or that's the actual icon he has?
No, I didn't put that in there.
Okay. I appreciate Patrick, cheering on my behalf, but I'm more interested in the substance if we can. But I appreciate the cheering, so thank you.
So so the debate was frustrating because it went to ad hominem and false accusations. I thought that everyone behaved themselves pretty good. I mean, no one's perfect, but I thought everyone behaved themselves pretty good. My overall opinion, he doesn't understand the supernatural power of God bringing us into the kingdom. He misunderstands Hebrews 6:10. Salvation is eternal. They miss God's power, purpose, and pleasure. Yeah, well, he's not here to answer for himself. I'm sure he has a very different perspective on that. But I can understand from a Calvinist standpoint, it might be frustrating to deal with limited atonement. In fact, in my own debate with James White, I thought he kept trying to bring up the discussion of whether election is unconditional or not. and I kind of let all that stuff go by, you know, just not that's not what I'm here for. Let's get back to the subject. But you're right, because you know, the presupposition behind that, I think, impacts the overall framing of the debate. And I think it couldn't have been more clear. And we should probably discuss the whole did God fail question, because I think there's huge presuppositional differences that sound like one side is missing God's power, purpose, and pleasure. One side or the other is. Okay. Dabney was the chaplain for the Confederate Army, right?
I think he was a chaplain for General Stonewall Jackson, who was in the Confederate Army, but he wasn't like for the whole Confederate Army or something like that.
Okay.
I think that's what it was, but I think it could have been that he was the chaplain for General Lee. Yeah.
So there stands Dabney praying for a stone wall. Okay. Yeah. All right. Right. And I think Dabney is today highly criticized for his trying to make a biblical defense for slavery, which is perfect.
Maybe that, but also there was a bigger problem even than that, which was he essentially at one point he said something to the effect that to avoid getting this censored, he just said that a specific race was inferior, and that's problematic for its own reasons, regardless of regardless of anything else, and that that's a bigger problem because that infected his systematic theology a little bit. So.
Yeah. I found his choice of verses confusing as well. Like, that's the first time I've heard someone go to John 6 to argue for unlimited atonement. Well, then, Reese, check out my debate with James White, because I made the same argument. I mean, so this is where the debate really got interesting for me, because essentially you granted his argument, and I was surprised. Well, in my heart of hearts, I was triumphant, but I guess I was a little surprised that you agreed with him. And then it made me wonder, like, what in the world are you arguing for? Like, how are you different than Charles Hodge at this point? But I mean, we could look at that argument. It'd be good. In fact, I can find the clip. I have a transcript. We could play it if you want.
But I mean, I don't necessarily think I need to be different from Charles Hodge. He's a 5-pointer like me. So,
but he's not, though. He's dual intention, so where Hodge is going to differ. Yeah, right. I think that's the difference. Okay. If you agree with Charles Hodge, then I don't know why you're debating for limited atonement. What do you mean by limited atonement?
So, I mean, we could, if you want to go through the Hodge's systematic, we could go through Hodge's systematic and what he's talking about there. But in terms of maybe I just don't know where I disagree with Hodge. That's possible. So that could be. It could be that I don't correctly understand Hodge, which would be possible. But I've been kind of giving Hodge credit for affirming the confession that he says he affirms. And if he affirms that one, then the intent of the atonement was to save the elect. And to say that there's another intent to the atonement, we have to be pretty careful about what that other intent of the atonement is and what we mean by that's an intent of the atonement. So, I'm okay with saying that there's other intents to the atonement, but if we're talking about the intent to save people, that's the part I think that should be the focus of the controversy, because that's usually the focus of the tension between Calvinistic and non-Calvinistic evangelization approaches, where people say basically that God's trying to save. Some people present it as though God's trying to save you and he just needs your cooperation in order to do so. And that's not the typical Calvinistic way of presenting things. But not that there's not some kind of very, very close or very similar Calvinistic ways of presenting things. But that's, to me, I thought that's where the primary issue lay. But
so
perhaps not.
Okay, so the Westminster Confession, well, I'm more familiar with Dort. So do you agree with Dort's points on the atonement, except perhaps for the issue of whether Christ purchased faith for the elect?
Yeah, I agree. Even that one I'm okay with. I just, as far as it being dogmatic about that, I'm less comfortable being dogmatic about it. But I don't have any problem with in other words, I think that there's an argument to be made for this purchase of grace, but to my mind, that's not it's hard. It's not what's the right word? At least I'm not comfortable being dogmatic about that kind of statement. But I'm not objecting to it like it has to be wrong. So I'm not dogmatically against it as well. But yes, in general, I even in preparation for this debate, I mentioned to Lucas, here's the part, and I quoted him from the Synod of Dort, the part that says that the saving efficacy is intended for the elect. That's the position I was planning to advocate for, and that's what I did advocate for.
Okay. So let's see. But are you comfortable with saying that there's another intention besides that? Like, obviously you want to affirm that, and obviously Hodge does affirm that. So the question is, are you comfortable with a second intention, that it be basically the foundation of the gospel provided for all men?
I don't remember how Hodge words that, if you're asking me about Hodge. But if you're asking me more in general, again, I would want to work out what does that mean? Like, in other words, what does it mean for that to be the intent? And also kind of connected with it, like what's the necessity? It's not a biblical, it's not specifically biblical language. Grounding the such and such is not specifically biblical language. So I would want to see, like, how are you building that up?
So okay, the way Lucas framed it was based on John 6, and he's like, that Christ is the bread of life given for the life of the world, and it's like the manna. The manna is provided, but you have to eat the manna. But the manna is there and available, and it's offered. People are encouraged to eat it. It's there for them, but they have to actually partake.
But I guess what I'm not seeing there is a different intent from the one that we just. In other words, the offer is there for everyone, for sure, no doubt about that.
But the giving of the bread, the provision of the bread, that the bread is sitting there, on the table, whether somebody eats it or not.
That it's publicly displayed. I think that was one of the verses he talked about, was that Christ's death is publicly displayed.
Well, okay, that was from Romans 3. That's a different question, so that's a good question too. So, and that's more like the serpent lifted up from John 3 language. But no, specifically on the John 6 language, it's the provision of the bread, the availability of the bread, and backing up the offer of the bread.
But I don't see that. Well, I don't see where the backing up the offer part. I just don't see where that comes from.
Because it's like manna. You have to eat it, but it's there on the ground.
So as far as the atonement, the work of Jesus Christ being there, I agree the work of Jesus Christ is there, and that anyone who believes will be saved. But as far as it being there in some other sense than that, that's the part where I just don't know. I'm trying to make sense of that kind of a statement, and I'm not sure what the sense of that statement is.
Oh, okay. I mean, so that it's given for the life of the world.
So that part I see as the intent to save. And I think that, in fact, it does give life to the world and does, in fact, save the world.
But by world, you don't mean each and every person that ever lived.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I guess at that point, I think the hard part is how to parse that out, because are you taking the references to world in John 6 as just the elect, or are you taking it as, well, there's a general offer of the gospel to everybody? Like, I mean, yeah. Well, hey, maybe we just play the clip here. Let's see. I think I have it ready. Hopefully this works, and hopefully it doesn't go to an ad. I apologize in advance if it does. And hopefully I have the right spot. Yeah, there we go.
Say it's an honor and privilege to be here with you, and I generally appreciate you taking the time out of your night to debate this important topic. So just want to give my hats off to you and pay my respect.
Oh, thanks, appreciate it.
My pleasure. Okay, I'll hit the timer. So first question, Jesus says in John 6:32, "Truly, truly, I say to you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread out of heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread out of heaven." Is the atonement linked to the true bread from heaven?
It's linked, yes.
Does the you that Jesus speaks to include the non-elect?
Well, the text doesn't actually come right out and tell us that it refers to the non-elect in so many words, but I think that it probably, the group of you here probably is a mixed audience that includes non-elect people. Yes.
So Jesus is telling the crowd that includes the non-elect, which is, you just admitted, the atonement is linked to the true bread from heaven. God the Father is giving them the atonement then.
In there is a sense in which that's true, yes.
There's a sense that God the Father is giving the atonement to the non-elect?
In the sense in which that's true is that he's sending Jesus there bodily and in his ministry. It's not that's not the case that Jesus is attempting to save them by his death.
Well, I didn't ask that, but you just admitted that God the Father is giving them the atonement.
In the sense I explained, of course, yeah.
So there's a sense that God the Father can give the atonement to the non-elect.
Yeah, we see that similarly. We see that with people who unworthily take the Lord's Supper and eat and drink damnation to themselves. That's not the sense of the atonement that I'm arguing is only for the elect. In fact, I would say drinking damnation to yourself is not for the elect.
So this sounds. Is this it's out of curiosity? Were you familiar with this passage of Scripture in relation to limit?
Well, I'll pause there, and we can switch back and comment on this bit. Okay, so yeah. I mean, at least in that clip, it didn't sound like you were limiting the world to the elect. In fact, it seemed like you were including the non-elect in it. But there, it seems like you're saying that the provision of Christ's flesh, or the giving of Christ's flesh to the world, you link it. You said it's linked to the atonement, but maybe you wanted to define it as Christ's public ministry rather than his death. I'm not sure. I couldn't quite square what you were saying with limited atonement at all. Frankly, if you could clarify it in any way, that would help me out.
I think the biggest problem with the question, the way it was framed, was that it's just somehow connected to the atonement. Of course, it's undeniable that it's somehow connected to the atonement. And then the problem is when you have this vague connection to the atonement, and then you try to build on something more on that, then you end up with statements that are probably just ambiguous at best. I don't know how helpful it is to say that, just put it this way. I affirm, as essentially all Calvinists, and maybe there's some PRC types that don't, but virtually all Calvinists agree that you offer the gospel to everyone. And that means that you're offering the benefits of the atonement, the salvation. You're offering salvation to everyone. So is it in that sense for everyone, for each and every person? that's living, that can hear? Yes, of course. But is that what we're talking about when we say things like, and there's two specific verses, which is, one of them is that gives life unto the world. Just getting the gospel proclamation and not without faith doesn't give life. And then in 51, the bigger one, which is, he will give his flesh for the life of the world. Again, it's the world there that receives life. That's not just receiving the gospel proclamation, because just receiving the gospel proclamation is not receiving life.
So are you, just to be clear, are you saying that when in verse 35, when he says that he's providing, he's the bread of life which is given for the world, that in that verse you're saying world means everybody, including the non-elect, but in 51, when he talks about giving his life for the flesh for the life of the world, there he's limiting the world to the elect?
Well, it's possible you and I are working from different translations. So in the translation I'm working from, John 6:14 is the first reference to world. That's just when the prophet should come into the world. And again, I don't see that. I see it as primarily as the place he's coming. And then the gives life unto the world, that I take as saying to that he gives life to human beings at large, not saying that he gives life to each and every human being, but that he gives life to humanity at large.
And that's the one where Lucas asked you, does that include the non-elect? And you said yes, right?
I think he asked me if the you is including the non-elect, not if the world there's. But maybe I misheard, or maybe I'm misremembering. I don't remember him asking, at least not in the part we just listened to, about what the world includes. But when he did press, what does the world include? I explained that world is primarily a location designation and indirectly refers to people. So of course, in this case, I'm not saying that he gives life to, the rocks and the trees and the birds and the bees. I'm saying that he gives life. Of course, this cashes out in him giving life to people. But I'm also saying that it doesn't mean each and every person when he says gives life to the world.
Okay. So on the world, of course. Okay. So on the point of the worlds, what it means directly or indirectly, I guess my take is that if you look up world in any dictionary, it's going to have a definition for the people on the world. And even if you want to say, well, the primary definition is the third rock from the sun, because of habitual use, even if you want to say it's a figure of speech, I guess it'd be, what figure of speech would that be? A metonym? Whatever it is. So even if originally it was a figure of speech, let's say like at the very beginning, world just meant the rock, the third rock from the sun. But because of constant use, it's just become one of the definitions of the world, and it means the people on the world. Even if initially it started as a figure of speech, now it's just part of the movie.
I'm sorry, you kind of cut off.
So, okay. So even if you wanted to say it's a secondary definition, or it was derived originally as a figure of speech of using world for the people on the world, either way, if you look at any lexicon, the Greek for cosmos, if you look at any English dictionary, the word world is going to have a definition that means the people on the world.
So I don't disagree that there's ways that let me put it this way. When it says give life life to the world, or give for the life of the world, of course, what's ultimately in reference are people are in mind with that. It's not the granite. It's not the emeralds and the quartz. It's people. It's human beings. It's not the angels. It's human beings. So I'm not saying that the humans aren't the ultimate referent of the word, but I am saying that it's kind of like in some cases you have to, if you want to make sure to understand the way that the people are being talked about, if you substitute something like Texas because it's a great state and it's in the news a lot and so forth. But if you say something like, I love Texas, or even if you say, I love Texans, a lot of times you could be talking about the fact that you go to Texas and the people you've met there you like, without meaning that you like absolutely each and every person who's in Texas. And that kind of, okay, go ahead. You're shaking your head like that. That's just that people don't talk about that.
Well, right, because I don't think that's true. If you looked up Texas in the dictionary, I don't think you get all the people that live in Texas. But if you look up world, you're going to get all the people in the world. So what I'm saying is that even if, let's say with Texas, we start the trend right now and it catches fire. And by saying the word Texas, we mean all the people that live in Texas. And, it just, this video goes viral and everyone copies us and, for, like 50 years. And the next time they update the dictionary, there you got a definition under it when you look up the word Texas of all the people that live in Texas. So you're right. Our definition will be secondary and it would have been a figure of speech from Texas. But after that 50 years of use, because of that use, now it's a secondary definition of the term. But that's already happened for the word world, and it has not happened for Texas. And that's my concern.
So that's not my argument. What you just characterized is you haven't correctly stated my argument back to me there. So something has not, there's been a miscommunication, probably from my side, not clearly stating what I'm trying to say. So let me see if I can restate what I'm trying to say in a way that will make.
Did you understand what I was saying?
I think so. Okay. I think I do understand what you're saying. So
right, let's see if you mirror it back to me.
So your position, let me see if I've got your position first. And then if I don't have your position either, then we really have a problem.
Yeah.
What we have here is a failure to communicate. All right. Yeah. So if I understand your position is you're quite happy to acknowledge that words like earth or world may have at one point just been used to refer to the planet or the universe or whatever, but that one of the meanings of those words has come to be all the human beings on that planet, all the human beings on the earth, all the human beings in the world, and that definition is a legitimate and correct definition of the term. Even if it's not the original definition, it is a definition, and if you go in the dictionary, you'll find it. I think that's one of your points.
Right, and Texas isn't similar. Yeah, Texas doesn't have that. That's not the case with the word Texas.
Sure.
Okay.
So, I'm guessing not because, but if you say, but my point is less about the dictionary definitions. My point is about the way that language works, and when if I say that I'm giving my life for the life of Texas, if I say something like that in that usage. Hopefully no one's going to think I'm giving my life for the Rio Grande River, or I'm giving my life for the buildings of San Antonio or something like that. Hopefully people are going to realize that even though I'm saying Texas, I'm referring to the people there. And the reason for mentioning this is because if people understand, when you think about Texas, you don't have a built-in theological tradition that says that it has to that use of Texas to refer to the people in Texas has to be a reference to all the people in Texas. Now, I understand that there is usage of world which people have in their mind that it refers to each and every person throughout the world. My main concern about that is it's anachronistic for us to read that back to the first century and to insist that that's what the intent of John is in using that word in John 6. And I think that the Texas-like use is more analogous. And when you use if you have a Texas-like use, then you don't assume that it means each and every person to cash out a statement like the life of the world or the for the life of the world.
So in terms of the anachronistic part, if you look up cosmos in any lexicon, you're going to get definitions where it means the people on the world, all the people on the world. And the reason why is because there's some non-controversial usages, like here, I think Romans 3 is a pretty good one. Like God is going to judge the world, and that the whole world may become guilty before God. Right? Like that's with Christ accepted, who is the judge. So everyone other than the judge himself, I guess, would be included in the word world. So in other words, what I'm saying is, I'm not sure how you could justify it's anachronistic when it's in all the lexicons for Koine Greek.
So I think maybe you and I just disagree on quite fundamentally on reading those lexicons and the meaning that's expressed in those lexicons. But that's possible. That's where our disagreement lies. So, and the related problem, go ahead.
Oh, no. Well, I'll look up the lexicon and see what it says. But anyways, what do you, I mean, yeah, that's interesting. Let's see. The inhabitants of the world.
Right.
That's in the Thayer's lexicon.
So the inhabitants of the world is not identical to each and every person. That's one of the challenges is you're hearing like when I say the inhabitants of Texas, and I say I love the inhabitants of Texas, it doesn't mean I necessarily love each and every Texan.
So it says the inhabitants of the world, the inhabitants of the earth, men, the human race.
Mm-hmm.
What am I missing?
The considered individually part. That's the part that's controversial, and that's the part that's not there in that definition.
What's the difference between viewing them as a whole race versus each and every one individually?
Because there's a particularity to each and every person that's not cashed out. It's like I said that's why I gave the Texas illustration that you were shaking your head when I mentioned it. And if I say I love Texans, it doesn't mean I love each and every Texan. Like that's just not how it cashes out in normal speech. And that's the same thing when you say love human beings. It doesn't mean I love, pick some psycho killer, this guy that they arrested who killed two parents. And it's not, that doesn't mean that. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. So if you said I love Texans, I would take you as exaggerating, as hyperbolic.
Well, I don't think it's an example of hyperbole to say I love Texans and not to mean that you love each and every Texan. I don't think that's the right grammatical category for that.
So, I'm sure I could find a Texan that you don't particularly care for.
Right, and I don't think that would disprove the rule. I think that it's not a statement about each individual. It does get cast. It does have to be cashed out by at least some individuals. Like if it turns out I don't like anybody from Texas, then what I said wasn't true. That I love Texans. But if I know lots of people from Texas and I like lots of people from Texas, even if I don't like every single one I know from Texas, saying I love Texans is still a normal way people talk. And people don't normally think that it means that you love each and every person who's from Texas.
Right. Okay. So when it comes to, I'm okay. When you say you love Texans, I take it as you're just, exaggerating, like, maybe there's some exceptions, but I take it that way. But what do you mean by it? That you love some Texans?
I don't think, again, I don't think it's an exaggeration. I think it's just a way of speaking generally, without focusing on the individuals. If I said I love 115 Texans, then clearly I'm talking about there's 115 specific Texans that I like.
Okay. So
like let me put it a different way. If I say I love Texans, I can't stand New Yorkers. Like you get the sense that I'm speaking in general terms. I'm not saying like every single guy from New York I can't stand. I might love Donald Trump. He's from New York, I think, or he was at some time. And I'm not saying I love every single person from Texas. I'm sure there's people from Texas I don't care for. But I'm just speaking in general terms, not speaking about specific people when I make those kind of statements. If that
So again, I would say in that case, what's happening again, I think that's just overstatement on your part. It's fine. Yeah, I mean, everyone exaggerates all the time, so don't worry about it.
Well, I think it's not really I don't think exaggeration's the right category. I think it's kind of like if you remember, there's a degree of exaggeration that can go into it, but when the people in Jerusalem were saying that the world has gone after Jesus,
that's an exaggeration.
They didn't mean, and no, I don't think anyone would have taken them to mean that they meant literally every person was going after Jesus, or that people individually were going after Jesus. But what did they mean? They meant that a large number, or a large group, the public, was going after Jesus.
Right. So that's figurative language, right? And that is common, because I mean, basically that is just hyperbole. What they're probably expressing is, by exaggerating a little bit, they're showing that they have some concern.
Well, again, I'm not sure that it's exaggeration, but I can see where exaggeration would work in that situation. But where it doesn't work as well is where his brothers, remember his skeptical brothers, told him, I'm paraphrasing a bit, but if you're such a big shot, go and show yourself to the world. No one who can do all these miracles does them in the corner of Galilee. So he says, go and show yourself to the world. Not meaning like go travel around the entire globe, but go and do something in public. Don't do it in private. So world there is not being used as a designator for each and every human, just being a way of saying to people at large.
Like, yeah, again, okay, so the brothers coming back, let's see, that's what, John 7? Let me look.
I don't remember the citation.
Okay. I'll show you. Okay, so they say, show yourself to the world.
John 7:4, yeah.
Oh, let me look. Yeah, sorry, thanks. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, again, it's hard not to think of that as figurative language.
Well, like look at the John 7:1. He says he wouldn't walk in Jewry because the Jews sought to kill him. But even there, when he says the Jews sought to kill him, it's not like he means that every single Jew sought to kill him. And it's not an exaggeration of something. It's just a statement about Jews in Judea, and not as distinct from in Galilee, which is more of a Gentile area, Galilee of the Gentiles. So that's why he's there in Galilee, not where he's being sought to be killed. And then when it says go show yourself to the world, they mean go to Jerusalem.
So there, right. I agree with your point on the Jews, because that's going to be just driven by the context of the Jews that were opposing him, right? So, I mean, that's picking up certainly from chapter 6, but there was an opposition to him from the Jewish side. So it's just picking up that sense from the particular that's already been identified. Now, has there been a particular already identified for the world? I don't think so. Yeah. So, like, again, I don't know. I mean, well, okay. Anyways, we've gotten far a little bit off track. So, coming back to the debate. Okay. So I think one of the major points in the debate was the question of, did God fail in sending his son to die for the world? So, and the concern that I heard you express is, well, if Christ came to save the world, but the world isn't saved, then he failed. Am I capturing your concern correctly?
There's a certain ambiguity because you and I used, as we just kind of explained to each other, we're using world a little bit differently from each other. But my concern is, let's just say, not put the word world there. Let's just say X. X stands for whatever we mean by world. But if you say that Jesus' intent was to save X and X isn't saved, then to me that is problematic.
Because why? Why is that problematic?
Well, it's problematic because of a number of scriptures that say that Jesus accomplished what he set out to accomplish.
Okay. So let's see. If a first grade teacher brings cupcakes for her class to eat, has the teacher failed if some of the students don't eat the cupcakes?
If her intent was just to this is one of those points I tried to raise in my opening, which didn't have a hook with Lucas's view, the way he presented it. But if the intent was merely to provide cupcakes for the class for whoever wants to eat, then no, because that was all. The intent wasn't that everyone eat. The intent was that there's enough cupcakes for everyone to eat. Those are two different things. So if the intent is just to make it enough cupcakes, fine. But there's a difference between making enough cupcakes and wanting to, and the intent was that every student eats. That's a different intent. Those are two different things.
So let's say that that's what the teacher would prefer. That, like, there's 25 students and she bakes 25 cupcakes, and she would prefer they all eat and enjoy the cupcakes. Has she failed?
If her object was, like, if she wrote down my objective is all 25 students eat. That's my objective. Let's say 25. I don't remember if you said how many students there were. Let's say 25 students.
Let's say 25.
24 students eat and the 25th doesn't. Then she hasn't met that objective that she had set for herself.
Okay. And has she failed?
I think the answer is yes, she's failed.
Okay.
She hasn't failed to bring enough cupcakes. She succeeded in bringing enough cupcakes, but something else went wrong in the process.
Yeah, I mean,
because her objective wasn't just bring 25 cupcakes. If it were, then that would be fine.
I'm not sure I would call her a failure in that case.
What if 0 people ate cupcakes?
That'd be different. It does make it sound more like a failure. But I think part of the reason why I wouldn't call her a failure is because although she wants everyone to eat the cupcakes, she also wants the students to have some of their own freedom, such that she's not going to, like, knock them out and shove the cupcakes down their throats.
Right. Yeah, of course. I mean, I think in reality, human beings have to accept compromise all the time. We can't have our cake and eat it too.
Right. So if the teacher had means available to her to make the students eat the cupcakes, but she just held back. Now, if it was like the most important thing in the world to her, like her number one objective in life was to get all 25 to eat the cupcakes, then yeah, maybe I would say, yeah, she's failed. But it would just be more like something else was more important.
It's like if you have a game, like, I don't know if you ever played those Zelda games that Nintendo puts out.
Sure.
But, like, you can I think it's those games. They'll have like there's like 1,000. There's like the main storyline. You have to get to the end of the story, but there's also like 1,000 side quests or whatever they're called that you can do along the way. And if your goal is to get all 1,000 and you only get like 900, you've played the game more than like 90% of the players out there, because most people just kind of play through, they get bored, and they go away. So you're a success in one sense, but in terms of your actual, like all the things you set out to do, you didn't succeed yet. And if you give up without succeeding all those points, in that sense, you've failed those points. Even if, like you say, like doing that might mean you have to give up your job and become a full-time, Breath of the Wild or whatever the game is called player in order to get this thing done. And that would be that would just be utterly foolish to do, because there's other things that are higher priority than playing some, beautiful Nintendo game. But it's one thing for like to call the person who quits the game to go work on their job. We wouldn't say that person's a failure. In general, we would just say like they're at this specific game, they haven't completed the game. But in life, they succeeded because it's more important to hold down a job than to play a video game. So that's when we're taking it as the things that Jesus set out to accomplish is doing the will of the Father. And it's kind of not a trivial thing, like not completing all the quests in Breath of the Wild, for Jesus not to accomplish everything that he set out to do, especially when there's something like that of all the ones you've given to me, I'll lose none of them. If he lost like only one or two of them, it's still not quite doing the will of the Father.
Well, okay, but I guess that was Lucas's point, right? He saves all the believers. And that's more important to him than saving each and every individual. But it's also important to him that they respond, that they believe. So, in other words, I think you guys would agree that Christ doesn't lose any ultimate believers, like people that believe to the end of their life. Now, of course, he would say, well, there's some people that fall away or whatever the case might be. But those that persevere in faith, you guys would be in lockstep that Christ doesn't lose a single one of them. So that's not the difference. Actually, hang on one second. Just a sec.
All right. While you're away, the mouse will play, and let me take a quick look at some of these comments that have been coming in. I saw from Discerner a number of interesting comments, also some from Kevin's biblical discussion. DR said that Hodge was a 4.5 pointer, so not sure the details of that. This one I liked. Discerner said the debate needed more of the Lombardian formula. For those who aren't familiar, that's the idea that the death of Christ was sufficient for all, but efficient for the elect, and something I would agree with. We didn't go down that particular path in this particular debate. And you're back. So
I am back. Yeah, and we can keep going through comments if you'd like to keep.
No, I was just trying to occupy the time, so I wasn't sure how long you were going to be gone. So please continue, by all means.
Yeah. Okay.
If he had said, and I think I tried to give him an opening to say this if he had wanted to. If he would say that the intent of Jesus was to save all the ultimate believers, all the people who finally believe, who are still believing when they die, or whatever the right way to describe his position is. If he would say that was Jesus' intent, his intent wasn't to save everybody, it was to save those who finally believe. Then it's hard to distinguish that position from his intent was to save the elect. And then the question is not so much whether that was his intent, but then what do you mean by elect? And he kind of hinted that he would have a different way of understanding election than I do, and that's fine. But I wouldn't have such an issue.
Well, I think that part of the issue that I'm having right now is you keep saying the.
Oh, yeah?
Why are you using the definite article? Okay, so the intent. Again, isn't that just presupposing that there's only one intent? And aren't you yourself open to the idea that there's multiple intentions? So if one of the intentions is to provide Christ's work for everybody and to offer them Christ as on the basis of that, but another intention is to save those that respond in faith, and another intention is that they respond, so I think it becomes much harder to say that he failed, and you use that with the cupcake analogy. The teacher wants all the students she wants to bake the cupcakes for everybody. She wants to offer them to everybody. She wants them all to eat and enjoy the cupcakes, but she wants them to be free and to respect their freedom, even though she doesn't have to. She could shove them down their throats or whatever, but she doesn't have to. She wants them to eat them. That, I think, because she's got all these different intentions going on, that's the reason why I don't think she's failed.
So if someone says that they want to make an argument, not that Jesus intends to save those who don't believe, who never believe. If someone says, no, I don't say that Jesus intends to save those who never believe, then I think we're a lot closer to being on the same page. But I didn't feel like he was comfortable saying that either.
Christ's intention is to never save those
No. Or, sorry, he does not have an intention to save those who never believe.
I mean, if you explain that in the right way and in the right setting, it's fine, but you got to be careful, because God wants everyone to believe and be saved. But if they don't believe, then it is his intention that they lost. Yeah.
So it's one thing to say that he wants everyone to believe and to be saved. That's a statement that a limited atonement person has no problem saying, or shouldn't have any problem saying, as long as we explain what kind of want that is. But if we say, it's one thing to say that, but it's another thing to say that Christ's intent on the cross was to save, you go up to some random person and tell him his intent was to save you, Mr. John Smith. That was his intent on the cross, was to save you. If you say that and the person ends up going to hell, you kind of made it look like there was an intent to save that guy, and that guy didn't end up getting saved. And that, I mean, I'm not sure, that doesn't look good. I'll just put it like that. And I don't understand. Go ahead.
So that is the intent. So the Huto Scar, like, in this way, God loved the world, that he gave his only begotten son. Right. So part of his expression of his love for everyone is that he's giving them all the offer of salvation through faith. Well, actually, maybe even the First Timothy passage is more clear on that. Was that First Timothy 2? Yeah, I think so. God, 1 Timothy 2:4, who will have all men to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. Right. So it's both. It's not like an absolute intention apart from faith that they be saved. He wants them to come to the knowledge of the truth, because he'll save them if they do.
To my ear, it sounds quite different to say that he wants them to do this in the sense that he's commanding it and he's telling them to do it. And it's something different from saying that it's his intent to save those people. If you just say, if they believe, he has an intent that if they believe, they will be saved. Sure. But if the point is that he has an intent just that specific person be saved, then that seems to me like, maybe I'm drawing a fine line, but it seems like an important line to draw.
So if it was only a command, sure, but it's an invitation, right?
what's the difference between an invitation and a command in your view?
Well, the command almost seems, the invitation kind of has more of a connotation of desire that you do it and benefit from it. I guess a command kind of does too, but not as expressly. There's more goodwill. I would say that there's more warmth and goodwill in an invitation than there is in a command. The command can come across as kind of cold. So to give you an example of that would be a general commanding soldiers to march frankly to their death. That's not an invitation.
I would say the invitation is kind of a softer, kindlier way of expressing some things, and it can be used in cases where there isn't an ability to command. Like I can invite people to come to my house. I can't really command, except maybe my kids. I can't command people to come to my house. You have, for in general, we can't command people to come to our houses unless they're family and they're somehow under our authority. But the whole world is under the authority of God. So when he makes an invitation versus he makes a command, it sounds nicer to call it an invitation. But in this case, the invitation is phrased, and I'm being purposefully clear about this, but the invitation is turn or burn, and that's not quite the same as an invitation to come over for cupcakes.
Right. So it's definitely both. So I get your point, and John 3 says it explicitly that it's a command that people believe. Right. Yeah. So I'm not disagreeing with you there. I think maybe I was just responding to your more abstracted point of, is it a command or
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. I did raise that question. I may have derailed our thought at that point.
Well, yeah. Okay. So now I've lost track. Where are we? Okay. Failure. Okay. So I think if someone admits multiple intentions, I think it becomes a lot harder to see that situation as a failure, because there's kind of this priority stack sort of thing in the desires. So if the teacher has some things that she wants that get fulfilled, other parts don't, but we don't call her a failure because enough of her desires got fulfilled, or whatever the case might be. In the same way with God, it's if multiple attentions are admitted into the discussion, I don't know where. I think you'd almost have to admit the same. That if you want to take failure in the strict sense of like every desire that God ever happens, then you're going to have the same issue yourself. So the fact that someone doesn't believe sounds like on your own, you get hoisted on your own petards. How is that not a failure on God's part? Because God wanted them to believe and they didn't, so he failed. Right. And that seems problematic. Or God hates sin, but sin happens, so he failed. I mean, I think you would have to put that God's hatred of sin, or his desire that people repent, and his non-desire of them to perish, into a contextual framework of where he has other desires that ended up being more important, and because he accomplished those, that's the reason why you wouldn't say that he was a failure.
Wow, this is a good discussion. It is starting to open up additional arguments that we would probably, or points where we would probably disagree, and that those would relate to what's often referred to as like the two wills discussion of the God's preceptive will versus his decretive will, and the way that we usually the way that traditional Calvinistic arguments for reconciling those two is not to say that, like, his preceptive will, the moral law, for example, is somehow a subordinated desire to some other higher desire, but to just say that they're not describing the same thing, or they both use the term will, but they're describing different things. So it's essentially an equivocation to put them in conflict with each other or in tension with each other, because it's they're using the same words, but they're not referring to the same thing. So that's the resolution that the traditional Calvinistic resolution is that one, because we don't have any conflict in God. It's problematic to have any conflict in God.
Well, if you take God's prescriptive will, his commands, apart from a desire that the command be fulfilled, just as a command, simpliciter, then it really is different than an invitation. Because an invitation does seem to be expressing that goodwill and desire that it be fulfilled.
Yeah, there's this conditional favor, there's a presentation of conditional favor. The condition is you must trust in Jesus Christ. If you don't, all that awaits you is the reward for what you've done so far. And that's the way it's presented. And the question, there is some question about that, to what extent does that, to what extent do we need to have God having an unfulfilled desire in order to say that that's a sincere offer or something like that? That's one of those, I don't know. That's maybe a bigger debate or a different debate, but it's linked to this question.
Yeah, I mean yeah, we have to be careful. I would just say at a human level, such a invitation, if it's not accompanied by a desire, would be insincere. It would be bad to do that as a human. We shouldn't do that to each other. Now you could say, well, God isn't a human, and I agree. He's not. He's God, and I am not. But why that's a difference here, doesn't immediately get my attention. But the language of Scripture is not as simple as, that God just simply commands that we believe or commands that we obey, but that he hates sin. So it does seem that it's the picture that we're given is at least on the level of, I guess you'd say, what is it, that the analogical, basically the parts of God where we have some analogy would seem to express it. The Bible communicates us on the level where it's not simply a command with no desire behind it. Now, if you want to say, well, God has, God just transcends us, and what he is in his own life is something that we'll just never understand, and yeah, he could probably wall it off that way. I would just simply say that that's not the way the Bible expresses God's desires to us. So apparently that's not the way God wants us to think about him.
All right. Well, that's a point on which I'd be okay with. I don't know how you're doing for time for this. I'd be okay with letting that be the final point. But okay. If you have other points you'd like to discuss on it, we could try to discuss them, or we could try to peruse other of the debates. But I thought this is one where you and I have the most. I think almost certainly you and I have the most disagreement on this particular debate, and it was nice to be able to talk through some of those points with you right now. And also, I don't know if there's other points you wanted to get to. I mean, you kind of hit what I thought were probably the biggest issues that were raised during the debate. So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, okay. It was a good debate. You're a good debater. There's no question about that. You handle yourself well. Yeah. So hats off to you. Okay. If you want to get through some more comments before we say adios, that's cool. But it's up to you.
I just out of curiosity, do you have monetization on the other channel for people to send in super chats and stuff like that?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Otherwise, I always say they got to pay the bills, got to take all the super chats, but there's no super chats. So let's see. But if there are, if you see some comments you want to cherry pick, or I can start thanking people as we're looking for comments. So thanks to Kevin's biblical discussion. And I think I mentioned, but he and I plan to have a debate on compatibilism in September. Should be fun. He says the plain reading goes against, we did discuss that briefly, both of those in the debate. So happy to discuss it more if you'd like, but it's, let's see, Patrick, thanks to Patrick, the end, thanks to Michelle Cherie, KJV, and Reese's Vids. Thanks to Frenny Cosmic. Yeah, I did not see that video on hypothetical universalism. Is it dealing with the 4-point Calvinist hypothetical universalism or Arminianism hypothetical universalism? Which version was it on? If you're still here, discerner, I'm curious.
Let me look it up real quick.
While you're looking it up, thanks to DR. Oh, and he said the Hodges 4.5 comment was a joke. So thank you for clarifying. Let's see. Let's see. Looking for more. Someone says boo to Texas. Reese's Vids. Good to see you, Reese's Vids. And Penny Cosmic says he does refer to Texas like that. Okay. Sugoi English 1. Good to see you here. Had some comments about Jewish hyperbolic statements. Let's see. No disrespect intended. No. He says, "Come on, Turretin, you're being silly." But no disrespect intended. Oh, no, fair enough. And I think this is a speech to text issue. Dan is presenting the plain meaning. You're allowing philosophy to twist your mind, and the knots to avoid the plain meaning. I appreciate that. That's your point of view. And maybe you're not alone in thinking that.
I have talked about John 6 with.
You are playing the video, correct?
I'm out. Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
Oh, I see. It was just sharing the audio to the channel. That's all. Oh, I can mute that if you're just trying to find a spot, or.
No. Wasn't intended.
So the part you played, though, was like, I think I've discussed this on the channel. I think you and I had a discussion on John 6 and the atonement at some point in the past. I'm pretty sure we did. So that was like the first thing that started to come to my mind. And he's like, where have you heard this before? It's like, well, just.
Yeah. It might have come up in your debate with Sam Shamoon. Yeah.
My debate.
Which I'm sure you blocked out completely.
I was looking through. I try to keep track of the total number of debates I've done, and then in the process, of course, I am curious which ones people are most interested in hearing. That right on the Standing for Truth channel, that's the one that there's the greatest popular interest for that particular debate, which was the same topic. It's phrased as the Great Calvinism Debate in the heading, which maybe is why it drew a bigger crowd. But I'm sure a big part of it is that Sam drew a big crowd because he's a magnetic. He has that magnetic personality. It's just that apparently he and I have the same poles on our magnetism, so the effect is different for me. But anyway, yeah, that one is the most popular debate on Standing for Truth that I've done, and it was like 40,000 views or something like that just on that channel. And then there's like, I don't know, there's a ton more on other channels. So lots of people have been hopefully edified by that interaction. So let's see. I hope this one I think was as magnetic or whatever as he is, I think Lucas is a better representative of a Protestant position. So I would rather this one become the more popular, but we'll see. Looking through to thank other people, lots of repeat comments. Not repeat comments, but repeat commenters. What's the next debate for you guys? Yours is, Dan?
So I have a FreeGrace exegetical debate on James chapter 2, and hopefully at some point in life this penal substitution debate will materialize, but that's what's on the docket for me, and I'm also yeah. So I guess that's it for right now for me.
And for me, as I mentioned, Kevin's Biblical Discussions and I will be having a debate on compatibilism, and God willing, SoCal Preston and I will be debating the canon of Scripture, which should be interesting. He holds to the long canon, the King James 1611 canon of Scripture, which including the Apocrypha, as not as Apocrypha, but as Scripture. So that is what it is. It should be an interesting debate if we end up having it. He gets promoted by those Roman Catholics over at Patristic Pillars and Apocrypha Apocalypse. They promote his work, so we'll see how that goes. But the I'm not worried about the studying for that debate, just because I spent the last 6 months on conversations in canon, you and I, Dan, so preparing for the other debate. So I feel like I'm very prepared.
Yeah. Are you going to be affirmative?
We haven't figured out the resolution. We haven't figured out. I'm happy if he's affirmative. I don't care. So whether I'm affirmative or not, I'm going to be arguing the same points. So.
Yeah, but I guess his position is so idiosyncratic. If he's affirmative, it might be less relevant, frankly. But anyways, interesting.
I'll have to look. I know he's done a number of other debates, or at least offered a number of other debates. So I'll have to check out and make sure I listen to any of the debates he's done. And we can work out. I'm sure we can work out a mutually interesting debate topic. It would be really interesting not to do a general canon debate with him, but to focus in on, let's say, Sirach or Wisdom of Solomon, and do just that book. Because
I agree. Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a good point. That's a good way to approach it if it works out that way. Hopefully.
I mean, I hope he'll be up for that. I don't know if that's. I really don't know for sure what interests him, but perhaps that would be something of interest. So we'll see. Or it could be specifically on the prayer of Manasseh, which would make it of very little interest to almost anyone.
Yeah, fascinating. Cool.
A Socratic affirmative. What is? What is a Socratic affirmative? Wonder what you mean by that. Do you know what he means?
No. Let me check.
I know what's the Socratic method is, but I'm not sure what a Socratic affirmative is.
Like,
maybe he just means this, that's my affirmative. I do a dialogue or discussion format. Socratic method. Oh, asking questions, but as the affirmative. Yeah.
Right. Maybe. Right, but I think the resolution itself would be affirmative from what I'm seeing. In a debate context, the resolution would be a question.
Interesting. Well, Reese has clarified that he means asking questions, but as the affirmative. Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
All righty. Well, thanks very much for this stimulating discussion. I'm glad we had it. I always look forward to these discussions, and you did not disappoint. So.
Likewise. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. Thank you. And thanks to all the commenters. That was a lot of good stuff. And sorry we didn't get to everything, but hopefully we covered a bit of everything. And yeah, thank you, TurretinFan, and good job in your debate. And God be with you.
Thank you. God be with you.